All right, picture this. You know the feeling, right? You're settling into your seat, you hear that click of the buckle, then the cabin doors seal, that sound, and you hear that low hum sort of building up to the whine of the engine spooling up. It's this immense contained power, and you have absolutely zero control over it. The plane starts moving, surges forward faster and faster down the runway, and then suddenly, somehow, this incredible unseen force just lifts this massive 100-ton machine straight into the air. For so many of us, that moment, well, the whole experience, it's this wild mix, isn't it? Part awe, part just pure gut level anxiety. Every little bump of turbulence, every tiny ping from the cockpit, it can make your stomach clench. Feels like something bad could happen. And yet, intellectually, we've all heard it, probably dozens of times. Flying is statistically the safest way to travel.
Oh, it's way beyond just safe. It's actually mind-bogglingly safe when you look at the numbers. Think about it like this. Your odds of actually being in a commercial plane crash, there's something like 1 in 11 million.
Yeah.
I mean, to give you some perspective, you are far, far more likely to die from a bee sting or getting struck by lightning. You're even statistically more likely to die falling out of bed. It's almost hard to grasp how safe it truly is.
So, okay, here's the core paradox we really want to dive into today. How can something be the safest, most statistically sound method of transport humans have ever invented, and at the exact same time feel like the most terrifying, the most potentially deadly? So our mission in this deep dive is to unravel that, to really unpack this paradox. It's a fascinating story, really. It involves incredible engineering, some quirks of our own psychology, and maybe most crucially, this relentless, almost obsessive drive to learn from every single mistake. Okay, so let's maybe unpack the safest part first. We talk about planes being reliable, but what does that actually mean in practice? It's not just luck, right?
Definitely not luck, no.
From your perspective, what are the sort of core pillars that have built flying into this fortress of safety?
Well, fortress is a good word for it. It's built layer by painstaking layer, really.
Yeah.
You can kind of break it down into 3 big interconnected pillars. The machine itself, the airplane. Then you have the highly trained professionals operating it. And then sort of overarching all that is the global system that guides everything. And what's really fascinating is that almost every significant layer of safety, every procedure, nearly every piece of technology, it exists or was dramatically improved because something went wrong in the past, because of an incident.
Okay, let's start with the machine then. The plane itself, we think of them as incredibly robust, but how far does this idea of mandatory paranoia in design actually go? Can you give us like one really striking example of redundancy, something that drives home the point?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, mandatory paranoia is a great way to put it. Engineers genuinely design assuming the worst possible thing could happen. And then they build a backup for that worst case scenario. And sometimes a backup for the backup. Okay, take flight controls. Modern jets are mostly fly-by-wire, right? Computers translate what the pilot does into commands for the control surfaces. But what if somehow all those advanced electronics fail? Total electrical failure, say. Well, in many aircraft, like a Boeing 747, for instance, there are still physical cables, actual steel cables, like giant versions of what you'd find on a bicycle brake. They run directly from the cockpit controls to the elevators and rudders. So even if every computer goes dark, pilots can still physically manually fly the plane. That's how deep the backups run. It's incredible.
Wow, actual cables. That's amazing. So it's not just having like a second engine. It's anticipating failure at almost every level and engineering a way around it. But okay, no machine, no matter how over-engineered, is foolproof without really good people operating it, right? So what makes commercial pilots such a key part of this safety equation?
That's absolutely right. The human element is critical. And there's been huge evolution there, too. Pilot skill is obviously vital, but maybe the biggest single shift came after the truly awful Tenerife airport disaster back in 1977, still the deadliest accident ever. That crash and others around that time really highlighted some critical flaws in the, let's say, traditional cockpit hierarchy, this sort of captain is God mentality. And that led directly to the development and adoption of something called cockpit resource management, or CRM.
CRM. Okay, so this wasn't just like a small training update. This was a fundamental change in how pilots interact.
Oh, complete. A paradigm shift, really. CRM totally changed the cockpit dynamic. It moved away from a place where the captain's word was absolute, unquestioned law to a collaborative environment. Now, even the most junior first officer isn't just allowed to speak up if they see something wrong or have a concern they're actively required to. It's part of their job description. It's all about collective decision-making, crystal clear communication, sharing the mental workload, and basically trying to anticipate and trap errors as a team. This isn't about relying on memory under pressure. It's about institutionalized discipline, the systematic, rigorous use of checklists for absolutely everything. Engine start, takeoff, approach, landing, everything. It's designed to remove human error wherever possible. And again, that's a direct lesson learned from past tragedies, ensuring critical steps aren't missed and every crew member's observation counts.
That's a huge cultural change. Okay, so we've got an incredibly resilient machine designed with paranoia. We've got disciplined, collaborative professionals running it using strict procedures. But all of this happens within this giant, complex, global network, right? What about that system? It seems like an invisible dance up there.
Precisely. An invisible ballet is a good way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
From the second your plane pushes back from the gate, it becomes a single point of light in this massive global performance, choreographed by air traffic control, ATC. Every single plane is kept separated by very precise vertical and horizontal distances. Every flight path is meticulously planned and guided using radar, GPS, all sorts of technology. But there's one truly revolutionary piece of this puzzle, also born from crisis, actually. It's a system called TCAS.
TCAS, Traffic Collision Avoidance System.
That's the one.
And this isn't just like a warning light, is it? It's more active than that.
Yeah.
Much more active. Yeah. If two planes equipped with TCAS get on a potential collision course, it doesn't just beep and say, watch out or figure it out. No, TCAS actually communicates between the two aircraft automatically, and it gives both pilots direct, unambiguous, and coordinated instructions. It will tell one plane, climb, climb, and the other to descend, descend, ensuring they move safely apart. This system became mandatory worldwide after a devastating mid-air collision over Germany in 2002. Another tragedy, another layer of automated safety added. It's a prime example of how the industry takes lessons from the worst moments and builds automated protection right into the system itself. So yeah, that's kind of the fortress. A resilient machine run by disciplined teams watched over by this global, constantly improving, self-correcting system.
And it clearly works. The statistics prove it. But, okay, if flying is so incredibly safe, why do so many of us still feel that knot in our stomach, that primal fear when we step onto a plane? What's going on inside our heads that makes the statistically safest way to travel feel so darn dangerous?
Oh, right. That's where our fascinating and sometimes frustrating brain wiring comes into play. The fear isn't really about the statistics. It's deeply rooted in our psychology.
Right.
And it really boils down to two main factors, I think. First, there's this profound sense of a lack of control. And second, it's how our brains naturally process risk using something psychologists call the availability heuristic.
Lack of control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone can relate to that feeling on a plane. The illusion of control versus just powerlessness.
Absolutely. I mean, think about driving a car. You feel in control, right? Your hands are on the wheel, your foot's on the pedal. You feel like you can react, swerve, brake, even if that control is partly an illusion. On a plane, you are a passenger, period. You've handed over complete control to pilots you probably can't see, flying a machine you likely don't fully understand miles above the earth. That powerlessness, it's a breeding ground for anxiety. It taps into a very primal human fear, not being in charge of your own survival. But then, layered on top of that, is this availability heuristic. It's essentially a mental shortcut our brains use. We judge how likely something is to happen based on how easily and how vividly we can recall examples of it happening. And here's the crucial part for flying. Is there anything more available to our memory, more vivid, more emotionally potent than the image of a plane crash?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Car accidents happen constantly. Thousands every day. But they rarely make huge headlines unless they're particularly awful or local. A plane crash, even a minor incident sometimes, is instant global news. Front page, lead story.
Exactly. We see the dramatic footage, we hear the heartbreaking stories, we watch the documentaries that analyze every second. These events become massively significant emotionally, so our brain flags plane crash as a major immediate threat, purely because the examples are so vivid and memorable, regardless of the actual tiny statistical probability. We don't fear what's most likely to harm us, like heart disease or, yes, even driving. We fear what we can most vividly imagine harming us. And that's the paradox right there. The very things that make plane crashes so incredibly rare, their catastrophic nature, their immediate headline-grabbing power, when they do occur, that's precisely what makes them so psychologically terrifying. It's one huge, awful event we can picture, not a slow accumulation of risk like, say, poor diet.
The human fear versus the statistical reality is just a fascinating fundamental disconnect. But this brings us right back around to something you mentioned earlier, this idea that the intense focus, the global scrutiny on every single crash, is actually why flying is so safe. Can you expand on that critical link? How does that learning process actually work?
It's really the absolute cornerstone of aviation safety culture. After every single incident, and I mean everything from a minor runway issue where nobody gets hurt, right up to a major disaster, a global team of experts descends on the site. Fast. Their job isn't about deciding legal blame, not initially anyway. Their primary mission is to find the why. What sequence of events led to this? They recover the so-called black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder, and the flight data recorder, which are incredibly tough, by the way. And they use that data, plus wreckage analysis, ATC recordings, weather reports, everything, to reconstruct the flight's final moments in microscopic detail. And this isn't just, filing a report that sits on a shelf. It's a global commitment to learning and acting on that learning. If the investigation finds it was, say, a mechanical failure, a faulty part, the entire worldwide fleet of that aircraft type gets inspected. Often, a redesigned part or a new inspection procedure is mandated globally, immediately, if it points to pilot error or maybe a procedural gap. Training simulators all over the world are updated with that exact scenario.
Future pilots practice handling that specific situation. CRM techniques might be reinforced or adapted. If it reveals a fundamental design flaw in the aircraft itself, you can bet the next generation of aircraft will be specifically engineered to eliminate that vulnerability entirely.
And this isn't just theoretical, right? You mentioned Aloha Airlines earlier. Can you remind us how that specific incident changed things?
Absolutely. Aloha Airlines Flight 243 in 1988. It was flying in Hawaii, and a huge section of the fuselage roof just ripped off mid-flight due to metal fatigue in the aging aircraft skin. Miraculously, the pilots landed the plane, but it was a horrific event, and tragically a flight attendant was lost. But out of that specific terrifying incident came a complete top-to-bottom overhaul of the inspection protocols and maintenance requirements for aging aircraft across the entire world. Not just for that airline or that country, but globally. That one terrible event led directly to structural changes that have undoubtedly saved countless lives since by catching potential fatigue issues earlier. So yeah, every rule in the aviation book, every bolt that gets checked, every procedure pilots follow, almost every piece of training, it often has a story behind it. And too often, that story starts with a mistake, a failure, a tragedy, and a lesson learned the hard way.
So it's like you said, aviation doesn't just learn from its mistakes, it institutionalizes those lessons. It bakes them into the system. That fortress of safety we talked about isn't static. It's constantly being rebuilt, reinforced, brick by painful brick sometimes, using the lessons from the past. It's this proactive, global effort born directly from the toughest moments. So, okay, wrapping this up, the next time you're on a plane, maybe settling in, or perhaps you feel that little bump of turbulence mid-flight, try to remember this paradox, that jolt of fear you might feel. That's perfectly human. It's understandable, given everything we've discussed about control and psychology. But the reality you're actually sitting in, that metal tube flying miles above the earth, it represents one of the greatest triumphs of human ingenuity and obsessive learning. You're inside a machine designed with, as you put it, an almost paranoid culture of safety, operated by incredibly disciplined professionals trained in collaboration, and you're part of a global system that is relentlessly, obsessively learning from its past to protect your future. So maybe think about that next time you fly. Has this deep dive maybe shifted your own perspective a little? Does the idea of flying thrill you with the marvel of it all, or does that primal fear still hold sway? It's definitely something to mull over, this paradox of safety and fear. Perhaps even dig a little deeper into the incredible world of aviation safety yourself.